The light above the kitchen table flickered, casting long, nervous shadows across the stack of envelopes. Thomas stared at the red ink stamped on the top notice. It was a jagged, aggressive reminder of everything he lacked. His knuckles went white as he gripped the pen, pressing it hard into the empty space on his checkbook register. The wood of the table felt cold under his elbows. He did not blink. The silence of the apartment was heavy, stagnant, and then the phone shattered it. A shrill, persistent vibration cutting through the room. Thomas watched the device slide slightly across the counter with each ring. He knew who was calling. Another demand, another deadline. He did not reach for it. He did not move. He simply sat there, his pulse thumping in his ears, trapped in a room that felt like it was shrinking by the second. The ringing continued, a relentless reminder that his time was not his own. He looked away, focusing on the grain of the wood, waiting for the noise to stop so he could breathe again. The next morning, the walls of the apartment felt too thin. Thomas walked out, his boots striking the pavement with a rhythmic, hollow sound. He found a park bench tucked under the shade of a skeletal oak tree. Beside him lay a book, its spine cracked and pages yellowed. He picked it up, feeling the grit of the paper under his thumb. He flipped through until his eyes snagged on a highlighted line. Riches begin with a state of mind, but true success ends with peace of mind. He stopped. The words were not a comfort, they were a diagnosis. He looked down at his hands. They were trembling, not from cold, but from the raw, grinding stress of survival. He realized he had been chasing a mirage, a fever dream of quick money that kept him running in place. He closed the book and set it back on the wood. The wind shifted, rustling the dry leaves around his feet. He took a long, steady breath. The race was over. He was done running toward a ghost of wealth. He stood up, turned back toward home, and began to map out the concrete steps of a new life. Thomas cleared the kitchen table, pushing aside the clutter of unpaid bills to make room for a fresh ledger. He sat down and started writing, cataloging every debt, every interest rate, and every lingering obligation. The list was a long, jagged scar of numbers across the page. Once the total was set, he looked at his wrist. He unbuckled the watch, the only item of real value he owned, and held it for a moment. The metal was cool against his palm. He had kept it for years, a relic of a time when he pretended to be someone else. He placed it inside a box, taped it shut, and set it by the door. Next, he pulled out his stack of subscriptions and cancellation notices. He tore them into strips, one by one. The sound of paper ripping echoed in the quiet room. It was not a grand gesture, but it was a necessary amputation. He was cutting his life to the bone, removing the excess to reveal the structure beneath. He closed the ledger. The house felt emptier, but the air in the room was finally still. He had stopped feeding the fire of his debt, and for the first time, he felt the cold, sharp relief of control. The new apartment was little more than a single room and a kitchenette. Thomas stacked his few remaining boxes against the wall, creating a makeshift desk from the largest crate. The space forced him to move carefully, his elbows brushing the walls if he turned too quickly. He spent the first week organizing the silence, keeping his focus pinned to the ledger. He did not buy furniture. He did not buy art. He lived in the gaps between his expenses. By the end of the month, he tallied the remaining cash. Every cent went toward the balance of his smallest credit card. He clicked the confirm button on his computer, watching the screen refresh. The total dropped to 0. He stared at the number, waiting for a grand sense of triumph, but felt only the quiet weight of the room. It was not a victory of celebration. It was a victory of mechanics. He had removed one link from the chain. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked down at the street below. The city moved in its frantic blur, but for the first time in years, he did not feel like a ghost caught in the current. He had gained his first inch of ground. The next month brought a new ritual. Thomas transferred $50 into a brokerage account, watching the digital balance flicker to life. It was a tiny, fragile sum, yet he treated it like a heavy iron vault. His friends did not understand the logic. They called him during their nights out, their voices loud and mocking. "Still counting pennies, Thomas? Come out, live a little." He listened to the static on the line, the sound of their casual spending echoing against his own rigid discipline. He did not explain the numbers. He did not justify the ledger. He simply declined the invitations, one after another. The pressure of their laughter tightened around his chest, a persistent itch that threatened to break his resolve. He felt the sting of exclusion, the sharp edge of being the one who always said no. He sat in his studio, the only light coming from the glow of his monitor, and focused entirely on the screen. He saw the $50 grow by cents, a slow, invisible movement. He ignored the missed calls and the texts that tracked his absence. He was building a wall, and every dollar saved was a brick he laid in silence. Their mockery was just background noise, a distraction he could no longer afford to entertain. Days bled into weeks, and weeks solidified into a relentless 2-year blur. Thomas lived by the ledger. Every paycheck was a surgical operation, divided into rigid portions. He stopped counting the hours and started counting the bricks. The routine became his skin. He rose at 5, calculated his expenses, and lived on the razor's edge of necessity. By the 18th month, the physical toll began to manifest. His hands developed a persistent tremor. His sleep was shallow, interrupted by the phantom ringing of a phone he had long ago stopped answering. One evening, staring at a stack of utility bills, the numbers blurred into illegible ink. He slumped over the desk, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The urge to spend, to indulge, to simply let the wall crumble, clawed at his throat. He sat in the dark for an hour, breathing through the suffocating pressure of his own self-imposed confinement. He reached out, gripped the edge of the desk until his knuckles turned ivory, and forced his eyes back to the ledger. He would not stop. He would not break. He picked up his pen, logged the final payment for the quarter, and laid another brick. The fortress was nearly complete, and he was the only one left to guard it. The envelope sat on the table for 10 minutes before Thomas opened it. His hands did not shake. He slid the document out, the paper crisp and clean. He scanned the columns. Every line item was marked paid. The totals at the bottom were absolute, immutable zeros. He blinked and read it again, tracing the ink with his thumb, waiting for the familiar spike of panic to hit his chest. But the space remained hollow. The constant, high-pitched hum of anxiety that had occupied his mind for a decade simply stopped. It was not a sudden explosion of joy, but a heavy, profound silence that filled the room. He leaned back, the chair groaning under his weight, and looked out the window at the afternoon light. He felt the tension leave his shoulders, his muscles slackening as if a weight he had carried for years had been dropped onto the floor. He took a long, slow breath, listening to the quiet of the house. No creditors, no threats, no race. The silence in his chest was absolute. He had reached the end of the long road, and for the first time in his adult life, the future was not a demand, but an empty, open space. The silence in the room was not empty. It was filled with the quiet hum of progress. Thomas turned his attention to the second page of the report, the investment summary. He traced the growth curve with his finger. It was a modest line, but it bent upward with relentless consistency. He realized then that while he had spent years running from shadows, this engine had been working in the dark, gathering strength while he slept. It required no maintenance, no frantic phone calls, and no high-stakes panic. It was a machine of his own design, built from the scraps of his former life. He watched the numbers for a long time, comparing the steady, compounding interest to the erratic, crushing weight of his previous debt cycles. The realization hit him with the force of a physical anchor. He was no longer a slave to the clock or the creditor. He was the architect. The tools he once feared, the math, the accounts, the ledger had been tamed. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the evening sky. For the first time, he felt the heavy mantle of survival slip from his shoulders, replaced by the precise, cold clarity of a man who owned his future. The screen door creaked, breaking the stillness. His nephew stepped onto the porch, his movements quick and energetic, a sharp contrast to the slow, measured pace Thomas had adopted. The boy walked to the railing, glanced at the investment statement resting on the table, and pointed at the bottom line. "Uncle Thomas?" he asked, his voice bright and curious. "When did you finally feel successful?" Thomas did not look at the numbers. He looked past the boy, watching the sun dip behind the tree line, painting the horizon in deep amber and violet. The question hung in the air, pulling up memories of ringing phones and cold sweat. He set his coffee mug down, the ceramic clicking against the wood. He turned to the boy. his face steady, his eyes clear. "Success was not the balance on that page," he said. "It was the day I realized I wasn't waiting for the phone to ring anymore. The memory of that specific, crushing dread, the fear of the next call faded into the evening light. He had traded the noise of survival for the quiet of his own mind. He was no longer a target. He was the observer of his own life." The boy left as quietly as he had arrived, leaving Thomas alone with the deepening twilight. He leaned back, the wood of the chair solid and unmoving beneath him. High in the branches above, a bird sang a sharp, clear note that cut through the cooling air. He listened until the sound faded, then listened to the silence that followed. It was no longer the heavy, suffocating silence of a man hiding from his mistakes. It was a spacious, open silence. He looked at his hands, resting flat on the armrests. They were still, no longer trembling with the frantic energy of a man chasing a mirage. He had traded the constant, jagged noise of survival for the steady, rhythmic pulse of preparation. Money had been the tool to build this fortress, but peace was the foundation that kept it standing. The debts were gone, the ledger was closed, and the path ahead was his to walk without looking over his shoulder. He closed his eyes, drawing a slow, deep breath of the evening air. For the first time in a decade, his mind was completely his own. He was not waiting for anything. He was simply existing, present in the life he had fought to reclaim.